Welcome to Talking Esports episode 7. I'm your host, ContactZero, and the guest with me this evening is none other than Excoundrel. Excoundrel is a colour caster who casts regularly for the ESL Premiership games, as well as events like iSeries. This week we'll be getting insight into colour casting to follow up from Sona's insight from episode 5, who he gave insight about play-by-play casting, and we'll be talking about the NUEL Finals, the ESL UK Premiership, and answering any questions from the audience at the end. So I'm going to ask you a couple of questions that I asked Sona because I'm interested in your perspective on the matter. But first of all, why did you become a caster, and what was it that actually drew you to becoming a caster in the first place?
It's an interesting story. I used to play League of Legends back in season 2. I was a player, albeit a very bad player. And I formed a team with like 4 other guys, and we went to this Liverpool tournament. It was like one of the first UK League of Legends tournaments, apart from Insomnia, that was obviously going on. It was like £1,000 prize pool when I played jungle, but I only played Xin Zhao. And we ended up coming like 2nd or something, or 3rd maybe. I can't remember, it was a long time ago now. And then they were doing like an impromptu stream, and it was like you just went over to the stream and started like attempting to cast because no one else was doing it. They didn't have any proper casters for the event. And Twitch chat, that we had about 50 to 100 viewers, and Twitch chat was like, "Oh, this guy's not retarded." And I was like, "Oh, okay, maybe I can give this a go." And then I started casting for the NUEL, and just went from there.
Okay. So, as a colour caster, when you began, what did you actually do to improve your technique, unless you're like magically amazing from the start?
That's a hard one because at the start I was probably better than a lot of the other amateur casters that we had in that sort of bracket that I was in, which was sort of like NUEL level type stuff. So when I really started to look to improve, because I don't really consider it as going to be like a proper career, I started to really improve when me and Sona joined up in EGL. So we cast for EGL for the first time, and for the story, I don't know, he probably told you this story as well, that we started in EGL and then we were like on the 4th stream, and then apparently everyone else was so bad that they were like, okay, well, not bad, but you know, just very amateur. But me and Sona somehow clicked instantly, and they were like, right, you're on the 1st stream now, and everyone else got really pissed off at EGL. But it wasn't good for us because it helped us with our careers, and then I guess for my personal learning experience as a colour caster, I'll tell you all the normal things like VOD reviews and stuff like that, but realistically, the main thing I did to get better was play games, especially in a team environment, and just watch. I just watched crap tons of LCS and professional League of Legends and professional streams, because in reality, most of the knowledge that I picked up was just from people who were more knowledgeable than me telling me about the game, and then obviously that's how I got my knowledge.
Would you say that the key component to learn then is the game knowledge?
Yeah, I mean, look, there's several aspects of being a caster. You have to have good presentation. You have to have ability to articulate well. You've got to form sentences that sound approachable and easily understood by people who may not know as much about the game. But realistically, as a colour caster, if your game knowledge isn't there, you're never going to be a good colour caster. Which is why a lot of people, I don't necessarily think this is the case, but a lot of people who are approaching a colour casting role and they don't have a good solo QE load generally are looked upon in a less favourable light than people who have a good solo QE load. I don't think that's necessarily the case. For instance, Stress, he's made himself into a fantastic colour caster, and he's gold 3. So it's not like it's the be all and end all of colour casting. But realistically, you need to prove that you have game knowledge that is equivalent to people at a high diamond level or mid diamond level or whatever, before you're really going to be considered or took seriously as a colour caster.
Right. Okay. So, when you're actually casting a game, how do you draw conclusions from the information on the screen? What is it that you're actually able to, I guess, divulge from the information there and be able to describe that to the audience? What are you trying to do there?
It's kind of a complicated question because it's not something you can really explain how you do. It's like I could look at any piece of information and draw conclusions from it. It's all about the way you process information. When you're analyzing a team fight, the best things that you can do is you're not looking to read play by play. So let's say, I don't know, there's a skirmish in the bot lane, Ramos comes in and ganks or whatever. You want to analyze what happened. You don't just say, oh, well, Ramos came in and ganked, because that's stupid. That's just replay by playing back. What you really want to say is, what was the vision like around there? Why did Ramos get into lane? Were they too far pushed up? Was the minion wave pushing against them? Did they the other bot lane bait them in by getting low enough, just enough to bring them in so Ramos could get a free gank off? You know, it's all about looking outside of the action and looking as to the reasons as to why that action happened. Because as a play-by-play, you're literally there to tell the people what happened in an exciting way. As a colour, there's no point just coming back and say, well, Ramos got off a really good gank there. Yeah, great. They all bloody saw that. What you really need to say is why that gank happened and what it means. So it's just the way that you analyze information. You've got to make sure that you're looking at the bigger picture. You've got to make sure that you're thinking of why that happened. Why, in a perfect situation, Lucian and whatever his name and bot lane wouldn't have been ganked by Ramos. So what has caused them to get ganked by Ramos instead of Ramos just turning up? There will be a reason. There'll be vision. They didn't look at the mini-map. You know, and those kind of reasons you need to think about when you're doing analysis.
Yeah, okay. So, like, what kind of factors do, like, say, looking at the map or items or, like, lane matchup, team comps, what kind of factors do they have in when you're kind of doing colour casting?
It really depends on how important each of those factors are. A lot of people will say they lost this in Champions Select because of how big the composition was in the determining factor of the win. A lot of people will say they lost because of vision control. You know, you've got to approach each game individually, and using the knowledge that you have to assess whether which part of the game was the biggest factor in the loss or the win. And it's something you have to do that is individual to all games. So it's difficult to assess that, I guess, on a blank point of view, Contact, because it's a very difficult question to answer. But as a colour caster, you should be able to analyse any given situation and say, what is the most important reason that happened? Was it the team comp? Was it the vision control? You know, was it the skirmishes, or was it just playing bad, for instance?
Okay. So how do you actually prepare for a cast? Whether that's with an existing caster or like a new partner? I guess this question comes in two parts, really. So the first I'll ask is in regards to, like, talking with the caster before the game.
Okay. So me and Sona have never once prepared for a cast, ever. Because we're just naturally quite good together. But for casters like Munch, who I never had as much practice with beforehand, we would do VOD reviews and analyses. We'd talk to each other about how we wanted to approach the cast, how we were going to have a talking dynamic. I think it's very clear to get one thing straight. Me and Sona have never been professional. None of our casts have realistically ever been professional. You stuck us on the LCS and we would be branded unprofessional casters. But that's kind of what gave us our charm, because we were interesting, we had banter, we had a laugh. Sona usually just took the piss out of me 24/7, and that was kind of how we worked. With Munch, I get a more professional broadcast, but it requires more preparation. So if you're trying to prepare with a new caster, you talk to them about how you want to approach it. You say, you know, if you're doing it live, you talk about the hand signals you want to use. You talk about how much color the play-by-play you want to do, how you want them to set you up. And generally get the major storylines set out in your head, because both you and the play-by-play have to be on the same page in terms of storylines of the game. That's usually the biggest thing. As long as you can bring the storylines through together, it's pretty decent.
Okay. And the second part to that question then is the actual, like, game plan. Like, what factor does, or not what factor, but how do you actually prepare for the certain matchup that the teams will be? Like, how do you look into them, like the research part of that?
Several different methods of researching. If you don't know the team, the best you can go off is op.gg and solo queue of each of the players. Try and find out if they've scrimmed anyone. Try and look at their ranked 5 history, if that has any. Obviously, we can't do that now, but maybe dynamic queue history if they've got them playing as a 5 together. If you know the teams, you can talk to the players. You can ask them without revealing their strategies, or in confidence, they sometimes tell you the strategies. I never, ever reveal strategies that I have been told by a player on stream. I'm always very good with that, because I know that they want to keep their strategies to themselves. But it gives me the insight as to say what I could be expecting in terms of the macro picture. Then you just, you look at the teams. Have they played before? What has this team been performing like recently? You look at their general past history of that organization or team or players, for instance. Generally, it's just all about how you'd ever normally research in any sort of given situation. It works in a similar kind of thing.
All right, then. In that case, do you think that, and I asked this question to Sona as well, do you think that colorcasters can actually do the same job as an analyst would do for a team? Because aren't they basically doing a similar role?
Yes, but you need to look at it in a different light to that. I think they can, but they're in general colorcasters. When we talk about colorcasters, most of them will admit they have two major specializations. You have micro colorcasters like Crepo and macro colorcasters like Ceirnan. And then you have people who have got good experience across the middle, which is someone like Deficio, which makes like the perfect caster. I've always lent more towards macro, but I have some micro in my arsenal. As an analyst, you need to be both proficient in micro and macro. You can't just blanketly say that any color caster could go on to be an analyst, although most color casters should be able to analyze at a decent level. I would say I could probably analyze at a decent level because it's a lot easier, I think, in the grand scheme of things to analyze, because you can watch the game, think about things, write down, then talk to your team afterwards. Color casting, you have to analyze on the spot, and sometimes you're going to make mistakes. I've made plenty of mistakes in my analysis over the years. So it's a lot more pressure as a color caster to perform. So yeah, I think as a general rule, most color casters could go on to be analysts, but not all color casters become good analysts.
Yeah, okay. Do you think that, I don't know, can you not just specialize in, like, say, micro and macro, and then you'd have two analysts doing certain key factors for
definitely.
a team?
But then you've got to remember that each color caster will analyze things in a different way, just as analysts will probably clash in a different way. But yeah, you're very right. You could have people literally focused on the micro and focused on the macro, and then those analysts bounce off each other. Yeah, I totally agree with you there, Contact. It definitely can work that way. But like I said, to become a good analyst, you have to have a very rounded game knowledge, and sometimes color casters will admit that actually they have a very specialist area of game knowledge, and that's generally what they bring to a broadcast. So, yeah, I think, yeah, in general, they could go on to be analysts, but not all of them could be good analysts.
For people looking into getting into casting for esports, like any title in general, but maybe specifically for League of Legends, what advice would you give to them?
Well, I don't want to give the like generally blanket advice of just go and make YouTube videos. It's very difficult to get into the UK scene for casting. You can definitely do UK community stuff. There's loads of stuff on the UK League of Legends community pages where you can go and cast like semi-amateur games and all that kind of thing. But realistically, you need to make contacts with people at ESL, Multiplay, casters like me and Sona and Munchables. You have to approach them with a VOD review or a VOD of yourself that they can review. And then, in general, the best way to make a break into the scene is having someone that knows you high up, is willing to recommend you for a job, and then on that job you perform well. That's how most of the casters have broken through the ranks. It's been that me or someone else or Sona or Munchables or Vedius or Jackson have recommended them for a gig that they couldn't do themselves, and they've performed well, and that's just sort of took their career off from there. And you think about Vedius, is a big color caster in the UK right now. He wasn't casting before last June. Like, before last June, he'd done 0 casting. And I thought, basically, for one of the Riot gigs, they needed a color caster. So I went and did play-by-play, and I thought they wanted me to bring in Vedius. So I brought in Vedius, and he performed really well. And from that, he ended up getting huge amounts of gigs. I recommended him for iSeries. I recommended him for PGL. And his career's gone off the ground. You know, he's off flying to California doing Vainglory, and absolutely fantastic, I guess, growth for him. So if you, as an aspiring shoutcaster, you realistically need to make these contacts. You need to make sure that the people you're contacting will look through a VOD with you, or you just keep chasing them up until they've looked at your VOD. And then you ask them what the feedback is. If they don't think you were good enough, they probably give you a lot of feedback. If they thought you were really good, they'd still give you feedback, but maybe then you'll get recommended for a job, as you go down the line. And honestly, the best way to get into casting is go through things like the NUEL UK community page, all these kind of avenues you can approach, definitely.
What could they do to improve their game knowledge or even casting ability? Is there something that specifically that you could give them in that regard?
If you're not good enough to play at the highest level of League of Legends, I'm not good enough to play at the highest level of League of Legends. That's why I had to supplement my game knowledge elsewhere. You just realistically need to go look at OGN, listen to Monte Cristo, listen to Deficio, listen to Jat, listen to Kobe, listen to what they're saying about certain situations of games. And then when you see that situation in your games that you're casting, you will have the perfect knowledge because you're realistically taking it from the people who know the best in League of Legends in the world. So you take the information from them and then you use it in your own situations. That's how I improved. I just listened to other people and I was like, oh, well, he's saying this about this situation. So if I ever see that again, and now I have a reason for it, And then I just talk to other color casters, and we talk about game situations together. There's a casting group on Skype, and we chat. We say, oh, what did you think about the Rumble Jungle that came out in OGN? And then we theory craft why it's good. We say where it would be good, and then we have all the knowledge that we need for it going forwards. So talking to your peers, listening to the professionals, applying that knowledge that you gain in other situations. It's pretty simple like that.
Okay, fair enough. Good point. In what ways can you develop synergy with another caster? You already mentioned that with Sona, you obviously already had that natural rapport, and with Munch, you actually had to plan out a little bit more. But yeah, is there any other information that you can give about with this?
Yeah, I mean, I still think I have good rapport with Munch anyway. It's a very different style of cast that you get with Munchables. Because he works for ESL, it is more professional, so we do require a bit more planning. But I guess in terms of building synergy, I actually just like to play duo queue games with my casters. I think that's a lot of how me and Sona ended up being quite good friends, is that we climbed to Diamond together in Season 3, Season 4 maybe. Yeah, one of those seasons. We climbed to Diamond together, just duo queuing bot lane, having a laugh. And generally, it helps if you're friends with your co-caster. I found it difficult to cast with people that I probably wouldn't consider close friends, because you can't have that same level of jokiness about it. But Munch and Sona, they're really good friends. People like Derry and Trid, they're really good friends. So I don't think I'd ever have trouble casting with them. Vedius, when I've cast with him, we've always had a good laugh because we're good mates. And Jackson as well. So anybody that I have consider a good friend, I generally say is I've already built synergy with, because it's just like building synergy between friends. As long as you can act comfortably around each other, you can talk comfortably around each other, that generally would be the best way, in my opinion, to build synergy. But if you want to build professional synergy, it is just practicing casting together, spectating games and talking together, making sure that you were on the same page when you try and cast. I would recommend, before going live, always try and cast 2 or 3 games together to warm up. But other than that, outside casting, you need to try and forge a relationship that is more than just co-casters, to have the really good stuff.
Well, then, to move on from that point, what were your first impressions of, say, Munchables, Sona, Vedius, Action?
I'll do it in order from the people I met.
Yeah.
So my first impression of Sona is that we literally met on TeamSpeak on the EGL TeamSpeak channel, and he was like, oh, hello, I'm Sona, I'm 20, I think he was 22, 21 at the time. And we were like, oh, so we're casting together. He was like, oh, what do you do? I was like, I'm a medical student. He's like, I'm a medical student. And then we were like, oh, okay. And then we were like, what elo are you? We're basically the same elo. We were like, oh, okay then. So then we just, I don't know, I'm pretty easy to get on with, so we just ended up having banter during the cast. And yeah, my first impression of Sona was just basically my twin, essentially. Is what we always used to call each other. We were basically twins. He's a little bit more bravado than me, but I think he gets away with it. He's Sona at the end of the day. That's his personality type. I'm a little bit more reserved than Sona, so whenever we were together, Sona kind of has the limelight, but that's fine with me. You know, I don't mind that. And I just genuinely really love him. Honestly, he's been one of my best friends throughout this last 3 years, and he'll be a friend for life, definitely. Munchables was, when I first met him, he was applying to the NUEL, and he'd just put out YouTube videos of himself, and we were really impressed with him when we first saw his casting. Honestly, very impressed. It was pretty ridiculous. And then he joined the NUEL, and he had some motivation issues at the start, and then he really started to think, actually, I hate my job as an estate agent, and he started to pick it up, and over time he became one of the most impressive working casters I had at the NUEL. I think if I hadn't been so close to Jackson at the time, he may have been a better candidate to take over in terms of heading up the NUEL's casters, because Jackson took over from me, but Jackson's always kind of struggled with motivation, and I think he found it difficult to run that side of things. But then I think it's better for Munch in the end, because he ended up getting this ESL UK job, which I think has been one of the best things for him. He's had a really, really amazing time with it and done so many different games. So definitely thought Munch was a lot more reserved. I wasn't used to working with someone who was quite as quiet, just having worked with Sona for all of that time. But once you get to know Munch, he's just as funny and just as, you know, loud and you know, charismatic as Sona can be. He's just a little bit more reserved otherwise. Vedius. When I first met Andy, he was a really obnoxious captain for Wales in the NUEL, and he was always a pain in our backside in the NUEL. It was hilarious. Everyone on the admin team was like, "Oh, Vedius, God's sake!" He would always come to us with a complaint of some sort. But eventually, we started to realise that actually he was really keen on getting involved, and maybe what appeared as like his over eagerness is what was just rubbing us the wrong way. And then eventually everyone was like, actually, Andy's really fucking cool. And I realized that having talked to him, he was really eager to share his game knowledge, and he was really very clever with it. And he was always really talking to me about my analysis and how it could differ and all that kind of stuff. So got him on board for the first ever NUEL Live as an analyst, and he really, really performed, honestly. And I think getting Andy into color casting could have been one of the best moves, I think, in terms of bringing an amateur caster into the semi-professional scene. That's like one of the best moves I ever made. Just in terms of A, reducing the load and stress on me for color casting, and B, providing in the UK with another top tier caster. So, yeah.
Okay, cool. Any others that you want to mention there? Maybe like Action Jackson or
AJ, yeah. He was called a Sigilus when we first met. Yeah, he always struck me as super chill. I think that's the best way to describe Jackson. He's really chilled out, but maybe too chilled out. And I think a lot of the reason you haven't seen him do maybe as well as some of the other casters is because he just struggles for motivation a lot of the time. But now he seems to have picked, after PGL, he seems to have picked it up, and he's sort of doing Vainglory, getting involved in loads of other projects. And as a person, I love Jackson. I think he's absolutely amazing. I mean, I'm a really boring host. I literally love everybody. So not host, a guest. Really love everybody. But definitely think his motivation struggled in the early portion of his career. And that's kind of what held him back. Whereas Andy, on the other hand, was super motivated. Like, every single day was looking to improve. Jackson was like, I'm pretty good. I'm happy with being pretty good. I'll just see how it goes. And then, you know, he was here and was consistently here. And Vedius was just like this, through the roof in terms of his ability to improve as a person and as a caster. So it's just the motivation for Jackson that's held him back.
Right. So you obviously like cast iSeries quite frequently, and with ESL as well, which is obviously the most recent, even though you'll be casting at iSeries next week. Actually.
Yeah, I'm casting tomorrow for ESL, yeah.
Yeah, well, yeah. How much does production actually help you in this regard? Do they ever give you tips on how to like present yourself, and like what do they say to you?
It depends on. So iSeries production is all done by the casters, except for the finals, which is quite hands off iSeries. So when you're doing group stages and stuff, all production, as long as they basically just say don't swear, don't play copyrighted music, and just chill, have a good time. And then the final is a little bit more professional, but still pretty hands-off, to be honest. ESL production has been up and down, especially in the last few weeks, but generally, I would say they're pretty good. They never usually give you tips on broadcast. They feed you information like, oh, we're bringing up the overlay now. Oh, we're going to cut to you now. Make sure you're looking at the camera, blah, blah, blah. All just the general kind of tips production we were expected to give you. But as casters, you're supposed to be the experts in the broadcast. So production would very rarely try and input how you broadcast. But obviously they will tell you if you're being an ass or doing something that they don't want you to go out on live on stream or whatever. So in general, production is very, very, very helpful. But they very rarely try and impact the way you broadcast, I would say.
Okay. So is there any point when, say, maybe you're going into an analysis and they might be like, right, there's been too much now, like cut to something else?
Oh God, goodness no. On the casting desk, they would never talk to you in game unless they say we've got a replay for you or something.
Okay.
On the analysis desk at NUEL Live, for instance, they would say try and wrap it up, hand over to casters when you can, that kind of thing.
Okay.
Just for sake of timing issues. And that's the only thing production have in their head, is that they want you to stick to timing issues. So, yeah, apart from timing, they would never have an impact, especially mid-cast. They'd never say, Excoundrel, you're talking for too long or whatever. No, they don't have that kind of role.
Okay, cool. Would you ever consider casting other games apart from League of Legends?
Interestingly enough, yes. And I guess the thing I wanted to talk to you about on the show was that after this season of the ESL Premiership, I'm probably not going to be casting League ever again. I might do like odd events here and there, maybe iSeries and one-off things, but you won't see me coming back to ESL Premiership to do casting. You probably won't see me looking for more jobs in League of Legends, because I've kind of felt like I've had my time now. But I think I'll likely be going on to do Hearthstone, and I'm also moving into a hosting role. So potentially after this, I know I'm doing the ESL Hearthstone Premiership. I'm hoping I'm allowed to announce that now. But I'm basically casting some ESL Hearthstone shit. And then also I've got a couple of hosting roles coming up. So after doing the NUEL Live hosting, that's kind of where you may expect to see me in the future. But yeah, in terms of League of Legends color casting, I'm pretty done. And it's not for one reason or other. It's nothing to do with Riot applications or whatever. It's just, I don't feel like I'm as good as I used to be. I feel like my knowledge has definitely dropped off a lot. And I'm now struggling to keep myself. I still think I'm a good color caster. I just don't think I'm as good as I was. And I'm not enjoying it as much as I used to anymore. I don't enjoy the sort of color caster role anymore. So I think after this, this would probably be my last season of ESL Premiership. Yeah.
That's quite surprising, to be honest. I mean, I honestly think you're probably the best color caster in the UK, at least. And I think you could go on to do like a lot more than what you're doing at the moment. But obviously, it's down to you to what you want to do.
Yeah, I think. Maybe I end up taking a break and I miss it, but as it stands, how I feel right now, I think I'd like to maybe focus on other areas of my career, especially in hosting and especially in Hearthstone and that kind of thing. But yeah, I still think I'm decent. but I don't know. I don't feel confident in myself at the moment as a League of Legends color caster. So. I'll likely give it at least a very long break. So it would be someone else likely casting the next season of the ESL Premiership, unless I have some sort of ridiculous epiphany and go back on everything that I've just said. I think likely the last season of ESL or even League of Legends casting that I'll do. But then there's other reasons. I don't think I'll ever be able to move to Germany to work with Riot and all that kind of thing. So. It's about where you are looking to progress after doing what I've done for so long. And that's just, unfortunately, the issue is you only have one option. It's really only going to be Riot because they have an absolute monopoly on the League of Legends broadcasting scene. So if you want to move out of the position that I'm in and do anything extra, you either go to ESL HQ or you go to Riot. You have no other options. And if you look at me as a caster, League of Legends is going to die someday. I know it's really strong right now and it's going to remain strong, but it will die. You know, that's just how it happened. I mean, people aren't going to be playing League of Legends for 20 years. And me as a color caster, if I don't have any other experience outside just color casting League of Legends, I have no employability once League of Legends dies. So I need to make sure that I have a lot of experience in other areas before I have no opportunity to do so. So,
do you know who will replace you?
I've got people in mind who I'd like to replace me. It's people that I've worked with for a very long time. I may not necessarily be a color caster that you know. They may be switching from play-by-play. But I will do my best to make sure that they have the best knowledge and preparation possible to continue providing great color analysis for UK League of Legends.
What would you say is your most memorable moment as a caster so far then?
I've had loads of memorable moments. I think my favorite was Four Nations. Four Nations was that was the highlight of my career so far. Four Nations. I didn't get paid for the event, but I had such a good time doing it. And it was my first really big broadcast. And I cast with a guy called Blood Penguin at the height of his sort of prowess as well, where everyone was saying this guy is amazing. And we did some online stuff, and I just remember the Reddit threads where it was like, oh my god, these casters aren't retarded. And I was like, wow, I'm actually getting compliments from Reddit. This is the highlight of my casting career. So yeah, the Four Nations and all of the Four Nations online events leading up to it, that was the best. That was the highlight of my career.
I did enjoy Four Nations. It was a pretty good tournament. It's a shame that Riot aren't actually doing any more. I don't know why.
Yeah, it's the return on the investment in the UK scene. I think is pretty low. So.
Yeah. So we're talking about ESL a little bit, but I just want to move on and talk about the Premiership for CS:GO. First thing I want to talk about in that regard is about 120 teams or something actually took part in the first qualifier alone last night. Whereas
128, I think, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Something like that.
Whereas out of all the three for League of Legends, I think it was 78, 70, something like that. So how is it that Counter-Strike actually manages to get so many teams involved in one qualifier where we can't, as League of Legends advocates, can't get even that in all three of them?
I find this very interesting as well. Honestly, it's because the UK is a console nation, and the transition from things like Call of Duty to Counter-Strike is a lot easier. UK just prefers FPS, always has done. The UK was a big scene for Counter-Strike 1.6 and Counter-Strike Source. We had some of the best teams in the world here. So UK in general just prefers for FPS-based games. Don't know why. That's the culture. We have a lot of League of Legends players here, but most of them are casual, and not all of them are interested in UK esports. I think Dragos gave me this quote that the biggest consumers of the LCS are actually in the UK. So they're interested in professional scene, but they're not interested in the UK scene.
Really strange.
That's just how it is. So yeah, I also think that because a lot of people, especially a lot of the mid-tier teams, sometimes don't want to compete in these sort of I guess organized tournaments where they just think they're going to get shafted by the one or two top teams in the UK, because there's such a huge skill gap between maybe the top three teams right now and every other team.
Yeah,
it's just massive. The gulf is just ridiculous, and you can see it in the standings of the ESL Premiership. You know, Manalight and Renegades, they're just leaps and bounds ahead of everybody else. I know not all of their players are UK, but if you're looking at the 3 out of 5 UK rule, they technically are. Yeah. And people don't and a lot of the more amateur teams, the groups of friends, they don't want to go into a tournament just to get completely stomped. And there isn't enough below the ESL Premiership to cater for those teams because there's no one willing to invest the money in it because it's just not a worthwhile investment. You know, you have the ESL Premiership, but it is literally for the top 8 teams in the UK. So, but people aren't gonna go into a qualifier for it when they know they're just going to get absolutely shit stomped by the very strong qualification lineup that we had. You know, we had Manalight, Renegades, all those kind of people in the qualifier tournament.
Yeah.
So people as lower, especially lower diamond groups of friends, they're just not going to want to play against them. Or if they are, they get knocked out in the first round and then don't want to come back in the next week or something. You know, so it just the intimidation of a lot of the upper UK teams is difficult for lower UK teams to get their heads around.
I think it's also we're like pretty big on fighter games as well. I always joke about the fact that the only reason we can play fighter games is because everyone is so toxic in the UK scene. So just playing 1v1 is actually probably the best scenario for us because at least the only person you can rage at is yourself.
The Hearthstone scene's pretty big in the UK scene as well.
Yeah, I think that had about 80 or something players. Of course, you'd expect it to be more because it's just one person, whereas you have to field 5 players for both Counter-Strike and League of Legends. But actually, just thinking about it, why is there no... I mean, I personally don't really enjoy DotA, but why is there no DotA anywhere, do you think, in the UK?
There is. The funny thing is there is actually a fairly big DotA UK scene. In general, it gets way more viewers iSeries than the League of Legends does, and I think it's just because we have a more hardcore fan base for Dota players in the UK. A lot of teams aren't consistent. They don't have consistent rosters in the UK. No one wants to support them because the team change like every 3 weeks or how it used to be. The rules in ESL are kind of attempting to negate that by saying limited amount of transfers per season, but people just aren't invested and don't care enough about UK esports. That's just UK League of Legends esports anyway. It's just a shame, you know, because we have some really quality players here. And it does make me sad when I think about, you know, the Spanish scene and the French scene getting like 3 to 5k viewers every time they broadcast, with people genuinely being fans of the Spanish esports organizations. Just don't have that in the UK.
Yeah, it's strange. So, do you have any idea why ESL don't actually do a Dota tournament? Do you know? I mean, I don't know how much you obviously talk to ESL, but do you know if there's something in like that works for them, or is it just something they're just not considering at all?
They have a limited budget, and they have to assess which esports they want to include. It's a bit like the NUEL. They have a limited budget, they have a limited staffing size, and the NUEL were very reluctant to expand from League of Legends for a long time, and it took them a long time to expand into CSGO and Hearthstone. And there are decent ties between ESL and the NUEL, so that the general idea is that NUEL players compete in the NUEL till they're out of university, and then they would progress naturally, if they're still playing, into playing in ESL tournaments. That's kind of the relationship between the NUEL and ESL.
Yeah.
Which is why the NUEL had spots in ESL Premiership and that kind of thing, because the general consensus was that it was beneficial for both organizations, because NUEL teams would eventually graduate and progress to play in the ESL Premiership or ESL events or ESL Go for LoL or anything to do with ESL. So
there's kind of like a nice bridge at the moment, really, isn't there? It's like you go from playing NUEL into the possibility of playing ESL, and then from there now, because of the Challenger Series qualifier spot, you can even get into Challenger Series. It's like a nice little stepping stone to get into LCS if you were obviously good enough.
Mm.
So with ESL, the CSGO qualifiers yesterday, there was a little bit of controversy going on Twitter as well as Reddit about the fact that, well, there was a big post. I think it was like actually reached #1, or at least it reached front page on the CSGO Reddit about the fact that that ESL are basically a joke. Have you got any thoughts on this?
Yeah, I feel really bad for ESL now. It's such a strange situation to be in, because ESL UK is getting bigger, but they're expanding at a pretty heavy rate right now. They don't have the budget to hire admins, you see. They just don't have the money. You know, you can't magic money out of nowhere. So they don't have the money to hire dedicated admins. So all like Peter posted on that, I think ESL Peter posted on that thread saying all of the admins are volunteers and work really hard. They need a lot. They basically they need a lot of admins. None of them are paid, and 90% of the time, most of them do a really good job. But you know, one times in 10, they all fuck up, and then that's the situation you saw on Reddit. That chap unfortunately had a team that abused the rules, and ESL unfortunately didn't react to it in the proper way. But that is a human error made by a volunteer at ESL UK. ESL don't have the staff to individually monitor the actions of every admin. However, I do feel like the actions of admins should be held accountable. So I am agreeing in the sense that I do think that at least some disciplinary action should face the admin from CS:GO. Not kicking him out, not banning him from adminning ever again, but at least, you know, saying we need to monitor what you do on the next ESL Premiership. We need to make sure that you're following all the rules, or at least, you know, having him show that he understands the rules fully. So I just feel bad because ESL gets the hate, and ultimately the blame will land with ESL because they are the company that hires these admins. But you can't find admins that are incredibly dedicated and incredibly passionate that will be willing to work for free on the scale that ESL needs them. So they have to take kind of the help that they can get because they don't have the staff themselves to run it, and they don't have the money to hire people. So it's just you know, it's a difficult situation, especially with 128 teams. I don't think anyone was expecting that amount of teams. So I imagine the admin staff were already overstretched. I'm not saying that what this admin did was correct, and not saying that what he did was the right course of action, because it obviously wasn't based on the evidence that was provided. I don't think any party was particularly innocent in this case. I think even that chap that made the Reddit post was guilty of not having all 5 players in the lobby at the right time and connected to ESL Wire. But the point stands that the other team broke the rules in a sense, or at least unethically played the system, and the admin didn't respond in the correct way. So yeah, I think when we listened to ESL, there was that controversy about it. Why is everything a best of one? Well, I will explain why everything should be a best of one just now. No one ever really got around to it. ESL don't have the budget to run a best of 2 across the stream. Then there was the argument that why don't we just have some games off stream or on a second stream or outsourced to League Community UK? Well, ESL Premiership is going for a spot in the Riot qualification tournament. I believe Riot have some input in the way the stream is managed. So outsourcing the streaming of games to just another channel is just not allowed because the production quality is not going to be the same. And every team for sponsors has to come onto the stream. You know, our sponsors want to see all of the teams in the Premiership, not just 4 out of the 8 teams on a singular night. So it's a really difficult situation, and I agree for competitive integrity, best of 2 is probably where the way to go. But we just don't have the budget to stream it. We can't outsource the stream, and sponsors want us to be able to show every team on stream. So it's just the unfortunate way it is.
Yeah, as much as I do like kind of shit on ESL sometimes, especially for like the best of 1 format, although I do see why they might have to do that. It's just a bit unfortunate because I would have much preferred to see best of 2s or like a double round robin or a best of 2 or a best of 3, like something other than just playing one game, because it just relies on so much going on in that one game. But
yeah,
go on, sorry.
Yeah, no, I agree in a sense, but the issue for that is that if we were to extend the weeks, then we again need more money to run the streams, because every time we run a stream, it costs you money. You've got to pay production staff, you've got to pay casters, you've got to make the time that you're using the studio. Even though ESL own the studio, they've got to pay rent on that studio. So it's a very expensive process to run a broadcast. And this is what people don't understand. People think we just turn up to the ESL studios and it all gets run for free. That's just not how it happens. We turn up, I get paid £125 a day to do an ESL broadcast, and then I get expenses on top of that. Munch gets a salary. I don't know what that is. The production staff all have to be paid. It's and especially extra people that they hire for the night get a similar kind of day rate to me. You know, I'm a freelance, so I charge a day rate. In general, my day rate for everywhere is about £125 a day. So it's just very difficult to suddenly say, oh, well, we've got all this extra money from nowhere and we can just run a stream full of more and more games. I agree with you. I think for competitive reasons, best of twos would be the best thing for the ESL Premiership. But if I'm completely honest, Riot said to ESL, because Riot have given ESL a portion of money to run the ESL Premiership, in a sense, I think that's kind of the deal there. Riot said, we're not having games from the ESL Premiership outsourced to another Twitch stream that's going to be run by amateurs from home.
Yeah.
We didn't sign up to this. This is not the quality of broadcast that we want.
That's fair enough, though, really, isn't it? I mean,
that's you know, if Riot say that to ESL after giving them money to produce this stream, Riot, we can't turn around and say, well, the players want best of twos, so we're just going to go against all of the money and the conditions that you gave us, and we're going to outsource some games to a stream run by the community. You know, the community streams where casters are amateur. Not saying they're bad, but they're not going to have the same production quality as ESL UK do in their studios. So, yeah. And then also we can't cast as casters for 8 hours a day trying to do potential 8 games. You know, it's just not feasible.
Yeah.
Especially since people like me, I've got lives and universities and things to attend. So, I think people looked at it at a very blank sort of face value type of thing, saying, oh, ESL just don't care about the players. No, ESL care a lot about the players. There's just so many other things going on behind the scenes that no one really ever thinks about. It's just a shame.
Yeah, and as we were talking about CSGO, is what I was going to bring up, is it seems so unfortunate because you can't, as you said, manage. I don't know how many admins they have, but I do know that when I've dealt with ESL in the past, when I've done, like, say, Go for Lols or whatever, there was a point when I can't remember what tournament it was. Maybe it was a Go for All or something on the website. Anyway, it doesn't matter what it was. And I needed like a player adding to the team because for some reason it hadn't been added properly. So I raised a support ticket, and like within minutes, someone responded back to me and sorted it out. That's just fantastic. They have one of the best support teams in terms of like ticket support in the world.
Yeah.
Like, how many companies can you say that you'll get a reply back within minutes? Like, even within 48 hours, most of them won't get back to you. So
that's because volunteers have access to the ticket system. So the volunteer admins have access to the ticket system and will be actively responding on tournament night. It's just a good thing about the ESL system. Although on that thing, I do think the ESL website, obviously ESL UK have very little say in how the websites run. I do think the ESL website needs updating. I find it's very buggy sometimes. But I agree. I think that they have a really good system on that with tickets. So, you know, they get very quick response times, and I think everything that ESL's done for the UK scene has been really good. They've provided a stable, money-winning tournament for teams. You know, what was the previous to ESL Premiership? There was iSeries. That's the only real tournament that you could win money from twice or 3 times a year.
And Epic Land, but now that's gone.
Yeah,
as well. At least for League of Legends, anyway.
Yeah.
So, okay. So
but, on the best of ones as well, given the current, this is just something that Will just mentioned to me actually. Given the current standings, I would say that the best of ones have actually given us what we would have expected, even if there were best of twos. You know, Manalight and Renegades at the top, Exertus, TCA, M&M kind of around the middle, and Infused and FM at the bottom.
Yeah, I suppose so.
I think that's basically what I would have assumed to have happened given best of twos anyway.
Possibly. I don't know. It might have fluctuated a little bit. We all thought that Renegades was going to come first. I thought Infused would potentially become last. I didn't think, although FM had like a harder start, I guess, than some, would be also 0-4 at the moment as well. And well, yeah, because they obviously they forfeited last week, so I didn't expect them to be 0-4. I thought they'd maybe be 2-2 or maybe 1-3 so far. I don't know, but yeah, I think if we would have had a best of 2 point, or maybe would have been best of 3 or something, potentially you've seen like upsets. Like, I don't think we would have lost to Choke in the second time playing them, or if it was a best of 3, I think we would have brought it back like 2-1 potentially, because we would have learned from our mistakes in that first game. And it would have changed how the format's going to end now, because let's say, and I'm not sure if this is 100% true, but let's say we both finish on 3-4 or 4-3. I think Choke will place higher than us just because that we've played one game and they beat us.
I do think Choke's a strong team though, and if I were to rate TCA versus Choke, I think you'd be very, very even. I think you're both, third, fourth, fifth seeds. That around that kind of area. I think Manalight probably have the best chance of beating Renegades in week 7. I think Manalight are undoubtedly the second seed, maybe first seed, depends on how they play versus Renegades. Now that Renegades have lost Caedrel to Copenhagen Wolves, I'm interested to see if Candyfloss continues playing mid for them.
Yeah, same.
Because he's a jungle main at the end of the day.
Yeah.
He's not exactly a mid main. I think the Exertus have had a really tough time, given that they were hyped up quite a lot.
And now potentially, or no, they have actually lost Tundra as well.
Yeah, they did. They have lost Tundra. Don't know what it was. I have no idea the reasoning behind that, but they're going to be. I think they'll be hard pressed to find a UK support that's at Tundra's level. Just me. I think Tundra, despite all the criticism he gets, is a good support. So
just moving on from then, before we actually go into talking about both the NUEL and the ESL Premiership, you were actually on the analyst desk for the NUEL Finals this year. What was that experience like?
It was amazing. I really, really, really loved hosting the analyst desk. Just a very different experience to casting. The downtime through games is very nice. I liked the time that I had to prepare my questions, talk with the analysts, all that kind of thing. I really, really loved being on the analyst desk during NUEL Live. It was really good fun. Really, really good fun. And it's something I hope to do more often, just hosting anyway.
Yeah. And also, recently on Twitter, you actually said that the NUEL is, I'll quote you exactly, the NUEL is one of the best things to happen for esports in this country, making competitive gaming more accessible. Some people think that it's quite exclusive because it obviously only involves university students, and for people who say once they actually finish their degree and graduate, they are not able to play in that anymore, so therefore it's not exactly the best thing in the world. But some people also think that it actually creates a bridge between like the completely amateur scene and like the ESL Premiership. And what are your thoughts about the NUEL? Why do you think it's so good?
Okay, I'll approach this in a couple of sections, in the sense that exclusivity, right? Okay. So if I were to take a organization and say, I'm going to provide a League of Legends tournament for physically anybody that wants to play in it in the UK with absolutely zero exclusivity, A, I'd basically be ESL UK, and B, where am I going to get the staff for that with no money? Because NUEL started off with absolutely zero money, by the way.
Yeah.
Where am I going to get the money for that to staff that? Where am I going to get the organizational structure to do that? How am I going to get a website together? How am I going to run this? How am I going to deal with the amount of teams that are going to want to play in this tournament? There is literally no way, logistically, that I would be able to run a tournament that included literally everybody in the UK. There's just absolutely no way. You have to be an organization like ESL to cope with the demands of that. So the NUEL started off, and it's just the same as a regular sport. Why is the university only regular sports? Why could I not just turn up to a university team and say, well, I'm not from university, but I want to play for your team? It's just that's how university works. It's part of the, I guess, attraction or pull of going to university, that you get to compete in university leagues because you play for the pride of your university. No one complains when you have the Oxford versus Cambridge boat race, for instance, by saying, well, I'm from Reading, why can't I compete in that? No one complains at that because it's Oxford versus Cambridge. It's a long-standing rivalry. No one complains when that big day. I don't know. It's like a day in May or April on Wednesday where they have that university sports day where they have universities compete against each other nationally. No one turns up and says, "Why can't I play? I'm a mechanic from Leicester, but I didn't go to university." No one does that because that's university sports. So I don't know why we have that issue with university esports. I don't understand. Sorry, what did you say?
Do you not think that, say, something similar to the Premier League would be like a good situation where you have like teams based in cities? So it's like Manchester versus, or not even Manchester versus like Liverpool. You could have like Manchester A versus Manchester B, and that's not excluding anyone from from being able to play.
I think that's an interesting concept, but it's very difficult to have people prove that they live in a specific city.
Yeah.
To register for your university at NUEL, you have to have a university email address, and you have to be able to access the email address and then click a registration link and prove it's you. So it's a fairly mediocre but pretty reliable system at proving that you go to university. I don't understand why people have this issue with the fact that people are allowed to play for a university team at university and compete in a university league designed for universities. If someone wants to go ahead and make that sort of town, Premiership type league, then, I think that's a fantastic idea. I think that could be really interesting if anyone ever wants to pick up the mantle. But you have to really understand the amount of organization, planning, and money that it takes to get an organization off the ground. Josh from the NUEL is one of the single most hardworking people I have ever met, and he's done it for practically zero money. Done this just through the love and labor of his own heart. It's a very interesting argument that I always get a little bit triggered when people talk about it, because I know I went to university, and I know that I had that experience, and I know not everyone is lucky enough or has the money to go and do that. And that is upsetting. But there are other avenues that you can go down. There are the UK community tournaments, the Facebook page. There are the ESL UK tournaments. So it's not like you have absolutely zero options when it comes to forming a team and trying to play. There's the Battlegrounds tournament that Riot puts out in all of the different leagues. I mean, if you wanted to make a team from the UK and compete in a really competitive tournament, now you have that option. So there is like zero reason why people should be salty that the NUEL is university only, because no one gets salty at other university sports. It's just a university league designed for university players, just like university sports. I think most people were salty. The biggest people salty Contact was because the NUEL had exclusivity and then was given the ability to take an ESL Premiership spot for free just by winning the NUEL tournament.
So. But that was the main reason. That's really healthy for the scene, isn't it? Really?
In a way, because it helps promote people moving into ESL from the NUEL, which we have seen a lot of NUEL players move into ESL teams after they finish university. I wasn't totally in favour of the NUEL getting a guaranteed spot in the ESL Premiership, just because I think that I don't want us to be given special treatment. I mean, I say us because I don't really work for NUEL anymore, but I don't want the NUEL to be given special treatment. I want the NUEL teams to prove themselves on the Rift versus any other UK team, and I think there are players in the NUEL and teams that can be put together that can do that. I'm very upset that the NUEL Titans didn't actually make their way back into the ESL Premiership. I definitely think they had the potential to. But that's that, really.
Yeah, fair enough. So let's talk about the NUEL Finals then, moving swiftly on from there. What were your thoughts on the matchup of Aston versus Cambridge?
I hadn't actually followed much of the NUEL before I came to the finals. And given that I was on the analyst desk and just hosting, I didn't need to have that much previous knowledge. But from what I had done, I had seen that Aston had played more consistently than Cambridge throughout the entirety of the NUEL split. And Cambridge kind of came a bit of a Cloud9 fashion and completely swung their way through in like a wild card gauntlet style thing. I think Aston were definitely on paper the sort of the bookies' pick to win. So I don't think the result was a surprise to anyone. I think what was surprising was that Cambridge managed to take a game. Just saying, me and Frozen Dawn did get the analysis on the desk correct. Screw you, Brixton. But yeah, I think it wasn't the result actually wasn't a surprise given what we thought about the teams coming into it.
Yeah, I kind of think that out of the two semi-finals, the Aston versus UOB was like the stronger half, and I would have much probably preferred to see them in a best of five, even though we obviously already seen the matchup in the semi-finals. It would have been interesting to see the matchup in the finals compared to, say, Cambridge and Warwick. I think they were probably the weaker half of that bracket.
I think that was generally what everyone thought, to be honest. In fact, University of Birmingham were basically considered the strongest team coming into it. And I think maybe would have had a better chance of taking the finals off Aston, because that semi-final seemed pretty closely fought between the two teams, to be honest. It was just the way the seeding worked out eventually. And, you know, University of Birmingham will continue to remain a really, really strong team. I think did they get beaten by Nottingham last year? Or did they beat Nottingham?
I think they got beaten. Isn't it like
I think they got beaten,
forever curse of being second, and this time they're not actually second?
Yeah, University of Birmingham have consistently been strong. But I agree, I think University of Birmingham may have provided a more action-packed and closer final between the two. But I think Cambridge put up a really good fight. So if they just hadn't, I don't know, picked Shyvana 4 times in a row, then 3 times in a row, maybe they'd have done better.
Yeah. Well, what were your thoughts on the games in general then?
Very exciting. First game was a bit of a stomp. Second game was amazing. Cambridge played a really fantastic game and fought their way back into it. Third and fourth game was just, they thought that Shyvana was the real key, whereas I really think it was the Lux play from Carniflex. And the Shyvana had less of an impact going forward, and Aston just adapted and knew how to deal with it. So it was just they tunneled in on that Shyvana pick. They tried to play for the late game every time, and Aston just in general aren't going to let you play for the late game. And then Aston also brought out their own late game, which is the fact was it was MSR on Vayne, and they were like, okay, if we go to the late game, at least we have an out. You know, we know MSR is probably mechanically superior, so we give him Vayne, then we have an out in the late game, and you just saw that they came through and won both those games.
Yeah, MSR seems to be like quite an interesting player. I don't know if it's just because of the environment that he's in at the moment, because NUEL seems to be a little bit more casual than, say, the ESL Premiership, for example. But he seems like he could potentially really be suited for the ESL Premiership, like maybe like a 4th or 5th place team or something. Currently, I don't know. I'll have to see like how he would perform in that environment. But he seems like a pretty good player. Same with Jet as well, actually, like a really decent jungler.
I think MSR would be good on a mid-tier ESL Premiership team. I think Jet is probably more of the upper to sort of third, maybe not good enough. Probably not good enough for Manalight, but you know, 3rd place team, Jet would probably have an impact on. Very, very good Elise player, so and Kindred as well. So. I definitely think Jet would be suitable in the upper teams. I think MSR is very good on Callista and very good on Vayne, but has slightly limited champion pool compared to a lot of other UK AD carries. And the UK is good at producing very good AD carries. So
yeah, it's kind of interesting, really, to see those kind of players develop from NUEL. And as you mentioned before, that some of them do eventually come from NUEL into other teams. So I hope to see some of them, maybe some of them from Aston, maybe 1 or 2 from Cambridge as well, like continue to play on afterwards.
Yeah.
And just in generally speaking as well, I hope that players that play in the NUEL don't give up as soon as university is over and just think, well, I've done university, I have to go back to real life and get a job and whatever else. I think like if some of them, like Nix, for example, like actually stuck to it and actually focused, then he could potentially become like a player on a top team or like mid team or something like that.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think there is the potential for these 2 guys to go on and be, you know, good players in the UK scene, and that's kind of what we need. We just need to funnel more of these good players. And the interesting thing is about the NUEL is that a lot of these players who play for the National University Esports League would never have known about the UK scene unless they had started playing for the NUEL. And so a lot of them are like, oh, I didn't even realize the UK had a League of Legends scene. And so that's the benefit of having the NUEL, that you can actually breed talent that would have never, ever have played competitively in the UK without the NUEL.
That's one of my problems, and I've said this a couple of times, so I won't go on about it. But it's just the fact that as you mentioned with Dragos saying that we have like the biggest population of people who watch the LCS. I don't think it's advertised too well in this country. I think that's the main issue that we have, or one of the main issues that we have with the UK scene, is that most people don't actually know it exists unless it's like promoted on the front page of or on the client, I guess.
Do you know when they post those things on the front page of the client, you go down to the comments section. Half of the comments are like, "I didn't even know people in the UK played League of Legends." Like that's half the comment sections you tend to see. When I go to this there's a subreddit called Team Reddit Teams, where you're looking to make a team with people, and you're trying to do solo queue. At least a good 30% of them in the EU West seem to be from the UK. There's a huge amount of players in the UK that just play individually but don't ever participate in the UK scene. So you're right. I think that there is work to be done in promoting the competitive esports scene for the UK, and I think it's not only up to Riot, but it's up to all of us, because Riot don't want to invest in us because our teams always never stay together. So what's the point?
Yeah.
And our teams don't want to stay together because there's nothing worth staying together for. So you're in this stalemate where it's like one of them's going to have to budge eventually, and you sure as fucking hell it's not going to be Riot. So we have to make the effort to try and stick together, stick in our teams, tough it out through the tough times that you sometimes see teams go through, and make it worth for people to invest here.
Yeah. Definitely agree there. So, one of my favourite parts of the show is to talk about the ESL Premiership, so we'll move on to that right now.
Okay.
Although, unfortunately, we had 2 matches forfeited last week due to, well, one, FM not being able to field their full roster, and obviously the Infuse situation with, oh my god, I can't remember his name right now.
Subatomic.
That's it, Subatomic. Bloody hell.
Cliff.
Yeah, Cliff, yeah. Cliff being banned for that week, although he'll be unbanned for this week. So the only 2 matches we're on were, well, the first match was Choke versus Renegades. What did you think about this game?
Just Renegades being Renegades, really. I think if any of the middle tier teams had a chance of taking a game off Renegades, it could have been Choke. I believe they had Nutri coming in, but Nutri wasn't as impactful as he was the previous week. Definitely, he was playing Gragas, I believe.
Yeah.
He just didn't have the same kind of impact that he had on his Nidalee. Because they banned it, because Impaler plays Nidalee arguably potentially better than Nutri. Although Nutri's been... I don't know if you've seen Nutri in solo queue now. He's like... I'm going to check. I think he's like
he's master.
High Master.
Yeah, he was Master 100 points on Saturday.
Yeah,
I don't know where he is now.
He's Master 100 points right now. So Nutri went from Diamond 5 to Master 100 points, and he's on like a 10-game winning streak or something. So the boy is on fire right now.
Yeah, he did it in like 2 weeks as well. Like I had a bit of a discussion with him on the weekend, and it's just he's really like motivated at the moment. He really wants to get somewhere, and he actually has a trial for a team at the moment, so that's quite interesting.
So I believe Dandy Chap's coming back this week, or maybe because I think he was on holiday.
Yeah, he was on holiday.
Yeah.
Like
I actually thought he'd been fully replaced until someone told me he was on holiday, because I wasn't expecting Nutri to be in for 2 weeks, but no, Dandy Chap's back.
Yeah.
I honestly, I actually think Choke was stronger with Nutri. Just my personal opinion. I think Dandy Chap's a great player. I just think Nutri, from the form he's in right now, he's probably getting towards being again one of the best junglers in the UK. I think Dandy Chap's top tier, but I just think Nutri's, in the way he's playing right now, is pretty darn amazing. But I think if it was anyone that was going to take a game off Renegades that wasn't Manalight, it was probably going to be Choke. But they unfortunately fell short. Nutri was just unable to have his impact, and Alfari was just on fire that game again.
Yeah, I think I mentioned it again last week, but I think that Nutri is able to like pick teams up because of his shot calling, because he's had so much experience on it on top tier teams that have won over and over again, so he has that knowledge, and that's why Choke seemed to be improved, whereas say someone like Dandy doesn't necessarily have as much experience in that regard. So that's why potentially why Choke were better with Nutri.
It's just his macro knowledge is really, really good. He's praised quite frequently for his ability to read the map and make shot calling just, again, better than a lot of other players. He's honestly, really, really good player. Looking forward to seeing him do well, hopefully.
But saying that, however, the shot calling in that game for Choke versus Renegades was a bit bizarre. So they did the standard lanes of Rammus versus Trundle at first, and then when Alfari obviously started going ham on Nig's arse, they decided, I think it was like 50 CS lead or something, they decided to lane swap, which at this point now Rammus is already in a shit situation.
Yeah, it was stupid. It was a really stupid move. I don't think that was Nucci making the call.
No,
I think that would have been. I think both bot lane and top lane got absolutely fucked by Renegades. So the Renegades bot lane is the strongest part of their team. Yuki and Hiva, who are funnily enough the only non-UK players. Yuki and Hiva are the strongest part of their team, and I think Yuki got Callista again.
Yeah, it's scary.
I don't know why people keep.
Scary.
I don't know why people keep giving him Callista, because he's just so good with it. And they were shafting the bot lane from Choke, and Trundle versus Rammus is an awful matchup for Rammus. So they just swapped into it, and it was too late for the swap, and they just screwed themselves over. Nutri probably could have little impact because there was very little to do. So yeah, it was just an unfortunate situation, to be honest, for Choke to be in. It wasn't much more to say than that. They basically shot themselves in the foot that game.
Yeah, because it was so strange, because all that happened was they lane swapped, so they lost the tower, and then they were like, okay, well, lane swap back now, and then they lost the other tower because of doing that, which is just like you're giving free objectives away for no reason. And that's
what Renegades love. They love the free objectives because they play like immortals in the sense that they just win their lane, get objectives, and just win the game. It's just the simple strategy of Renegades. Just be better than your opponent.
Yeah, it does seem to be a lot like that. So there was obviously also, as you mentioned, Alfari, like he just a combination of really good TPs from him and bad decisions from Choke led like that gold lead to just slowly increase. Like there was a fight at top lane where Hiva was maybe a little bit too much overextended, but then Choke stayed and decided to chase him for the full duration. Alfari, he TP'd, and I think they got return kill instead of and Hiva didn't even die in the first place. And then there was a fight in mid lane, which was going to be 3v2 in terms of Choke's favour, but as they chased for it, Alfari again TP'd in and turned it, and I think they got like 3 kills, then they got the inner turret, and they just started, from there on, it was like maybe like 6k gold lead, and it was just the game was over. That was it.
Yeah, it was, generally, again, overall, just better play from Renegades. That's generally how they play, just better than their opponents. Alfari, like you said, made some really fantastic teleports that game. There's not much to say about that game. Choke shot themselves in the foot when they lane swapped and lost those objectives. It was almost unrecoverable from that point, just given how Renegades looked to play. There were situations where Choke looked like they made some good picks, but they stayed for too long, and like you said, got chased down and eventually turned around on. So, yeah. That was that game.
So yeah, going on to the second game of the night, or the final game of the night, it was Exertus versus Manalight, which honestly I thought
it was going to be closer than it was.
Yeah, I thought it was going to be one of the greatest games of the century, but it let me down a little bit. So I'll let you go first. What did you think about the game?
Manalight strategically are the best team in the ESL Premiership. Like, strategically, in the strategies that they employ, they're the best team in the ESL Premiership. In part due to their coach, Frozen Dawn, just does so much work with them. Literally every night, I just see him doing scrims and talking about lane swaps and all this kind of stuff. They're the best strategic team in the ESL Premiership. I think Renegades may be mechanically better. But I do think Manalight become far more prepared than Renegades. I think that Manalight prepare the most out of any team in the ESL Premiership, and their results show for it. I actually can't remember that game fully. You'll have to remind me what happened.
Okay.
But I remember it being a bit stompy in favour of Manalight.
I'll go through it, but I think I was going to make a point. Then what was I going to say? Yeah, I think that Renegades basically, because there might be a slight bit of arrogance there. I'm not saying there is, but there might be a slight arrogance there going, we're the best players in each role, so we don't need to prepare. It's kind of like what happened with Choke back in pre this lineup, basically the one that was so successful. I know because I'm good friends with all of them. They basically never ever prepared, practiced, or anything for any tournament, because they were like, well, we're better than everyone, why do we need to? And it's such a shame, because if they had actually prepared, then they would have probably gone a lot further than they actually managed to go. But yeah, anyway, a little side tangent there. We'll talk about the matchup and what I thought. So there was a bit of like a Clown Fiesta dive at top. I don't know if you remember. Fairly early on, it was a bit strange.
Exertus went for a really stupid dive, right?
Yeah,
and then,
yeah. There was, and it was just such a weird. They managed to get something out of it, but then they committed too hard. And I think they maybe got like 1 or 2 kills, but then Manalight got 1 or 2 kills, and then
they chased onto him, and then it was Corky picked up 2 kills.
2 kills, yeah. Which at that point, realistically, I thought the game should have been over for Exertus. If you got Corky in that scenario, having 2 kills already, surely you're expecting him to get those power spike items even quicker and just absolutely shred everyone. And it kind of did show. He was playing really well, but I feel like the pressure might have got to him because he thought, I need to like carry now. And every time he got a kill, it just got traded back instantly. Yeah, go on, sorry.
Yeah, I remember that game now. My issue with it was they kept putting Corky into split push. Like, why would you put Corky into a split push when he's your strongest member and he only shines in smaller skirmishes and he's really good at team fighting in the mid game? Like, no, you need to utilize that package. You need to make sure that he is there to try and turn the tide of skirmishes, but they just kept putting him in the side lane, saying, "Oh, well, you push that side lane up." And then, like you said, every time he traded a kill, he'd always get killed back because he was trading it in a 1v1 scenario where Manalight just collapsed better. So yeah, Exertus just screwed up. You know, I think Manalight probably had it in the bag anyway, but Exertus just kept putting Corky in a side lane away from his team where he was the only member that was moderately strong. So yeah, I don't understand.
And Exertus, they kind of, it just seemed like they would overcommit every single time. I mean, don't get me wrong, Manalight played pretty well, but it was just really crazy. Like, Tundra would go for a hook that really, like, fine, land the hook, but he'd just go in for it when there was no need to, and then they'd get a kill, and then because of that, like, Manalight would get something, and yeah, it was just a very strange game. I was hoping that it would have been a bit more high level than it actually ended up being, but Furion played like out of his mind that game anyway, like on Lee Sin. Like,
I think Furion always plays out of his mind.
It was really, really impressive.
Dongs has always been an amazing jungler, and his vision control has always been on point. I've always been impressed in the early game. He always manages to get deep vision down, plays highly mobile junglers, gets in and out of the enemy jungle very well. So I think Manalight definitely have the potential to go on to do very well in the ESL Premiership, if not win it. I think they're one of the favourites, obviously, with Renegades. I think week 7 is going to be the big week. We'll see what actually happens between the two of them.
Yeah, that's
hoping Manalight can live up to the hype.
That'd be interesting. I'm hoping that will be a really good game. I imagine it will be, especially since the scenario that is happening at the moment, which is the fact that K-Droll isn't playing for Renegades anymore, and I don't know if they're going to keep Candy Floss. I assume not.
I think they just needed an emergency sub, essentially.
I don't even know if he's playing this week. I believe he is, but I don't know. I'm not sure. Well, who do you think was the? And it feels a bit stupid to give an MVP award of the week when there was only 2 games, but I feel like I've kept the tradition now, so I might as well continue it now. Like, who would you have given the MVP award for that week?
Probably out of the 2 games, I don't want to give it to Yuki because he's just always plays well on Kalista. But I think, yeah, I think I'd give it to Yuki. I know they had the easier game, but if I had an MVP for the entire Premiership, it'd be Yuki just on Kalista right now. He's been given it every single game. The guy is an absolute phenomenal beast. But if I was to pick an MVP between the 2 games, it would be Yuki and then Furion. Just beast in those 2 games. But I think Yuki just consistently performs so bloody well on that champion. I'm interested to see what he pulls out the bag if people actually decide to ban it away from him.
Yeah.
Which I imagine is going to be the case because Kalista is a moderately viable ban in ranked 5s right now. So
yeah. So I mean, I think I was struggling to decide between like Alfari because he basically decided a lot of the fights in that game. And then I was just thinking after watching the Manalight game that because of how Furion set up, like some of his kicks were just so juicy. I think really I would have had to give it to him. I think he got a 5-man kick at some point, or twice maybe. And it was just so good to watch. It's so good to watch a good Lee Sin player. So I think I might edge it to Furion in that scenario.
Yeah, I think if I were, maybe Furion in the sense that Yuki is just basically playing his best champion. But no, I think Yuki and Furion both played amazingly last week gone.
So
yeah, definitely.
We'll talk about this week coming up or tomorrow's matches.
Okay.
Which is going to be, I assume, if it runs, is Infused versus Exertus, which is the first match. I mean, I think it's pretty clear that even if they do get... Well, I say Infused, sorry. I'm just so used to saying Infused. It's no longer Infused, but the team...
Is it CBA? Is it Cliff's a boosted animal?
I don't know. Let's just say it is that team. So Cliff's boosted animals. Who do you think will win? I think it's pretty obvious that Exertus will win.
Exertus probably. But I know that Brixton has been preparing some cheese strats, which I'm not allowed to talk about and won't talk about.
Yeah, that's fair enough.
So maybe these cheese strats come out the bag. We'll see. But I think on paper, Exertus will win. Yeah, for sure.
Unless they don't manage to field 4 or 5 players, and then they have
I'm sure they will. They've still got roster swaps available, I think. So
imagine if they didn't actually manage that would kind of throw the table a bit crazy, wouldn't it?
Yeah, because Infused couldn't swap out their roster, I believe, because they used all of their roster swaps before the season. So that's what they had to do. It's just they said, screw it, we can't be bothered anymore.
Yeah. So, okay. So the matchup after that is FM versus Choke, which I think should hopefully be like a really good game. But FM last week didn't field the full roster because 2 players didn't turn up. I don't really know what the scenario was there, but it sounded
2 players left. 2 players left, I think, actually left the team.
Oh, really? Is that what it was? I can't.
Well, that's what I got told, but I'm not sure if that's totally correct.
So I mean, that's going to be interesting then. I'm really disappointed we didn't get to play them last week because I honestly thought we'd absolutely trounced all over them. But we can't prove that now, unfortunately, so that's a shame. Well, if it does play out, who do you think will win?
Choke.
Yeah, I think I'll agree, although we're hoping FM win because that helps us in the standings, obviously. Definitely. So I'm going to say hopefully FM win, but I think Choke will. And then the third match is Renegades versus TCA.
Well, I think I want to say TCA for you, but I think Renegades. I think Renegades. Unless you've got something special prepared for them, I do think Renegades just are a stronger team.
Maybe we do. Who knows? Ooh.
I know that you're gonna say TCA.
No, I'm not. I'm not gonna say. I really hope we win.
But it's an uphill battle for you.
If they would have had K-Draw, I would have said there's like a 5% chance we would have won or something. But now that they have Candy Floss, I do think it increases our chances.
For sure, yeah. Candy Floss didn't look strong at mid.
No, I mean if you look at the difference of TF play from Candy Floss to Lawson, was it who played TF in the it was Lawson who played TF. Like you can see the difference of skill level or like champ mastery of the 2 TFs. So I mean we know he's a jungle main, so he's not really suited to play mid lane. He didn't really do much apart from at the end of the game when he actually split push with Alfari, and that basically won them the game because they got that inhib when they made a silly mistake elsewhere. But yeah, I think I mean obviously Renegades are super strong at the moment. We've got some things planned for them. I'm not going to say it's impossible, but what a story that would be if we beat them, eh?
It would be pretty incredible. I think Manalight would thank you quite heavily if you managed to pull out a win against Renegades.
Secretly, the entirety of the ESL Prem is actually just WWE, and it's all scripted. So Manalight will finish on top, and it'll be all thanks to us.
Yep.
So the last game of the night is Manalight versus M&M. Again, Manalight are going to win.
Manalight are going to win. Unless M&M do one of their cheesy give half-past Thor a random champion that no one really knows how to deal with. But I think Manalight is sensible enough and have the experience to deal with most of the things that M&M can throw at them. And whilst I really like M&M as players, and I love half-past Thor, and even though he plays a very interesting style of mid lane, I just think Manalight are just superior. And it will be, again, there is the potential for an upset. I think M&M can upset anybody in the Premier League. But I just think Manalight are the stronger team.
Yeah, we have to play them the week after, so we're not going to underestimate them. But I think Manalight aren't stupid enough to kind of just let, like, say, who was it? FM? Yeah, it was FM. I don't think Manalight are stupid enough to basically let them say, like, play Carthus and just do nothing for 20 minutes and just go, yeah, you can scale the Carthus and we won't do anything, and then you'll just win the game. No, Manalight will take it, like, head on, and I think one of the good ways to beat M&M is because from what we've seen so far is half-past Thor just plays these scaling mids, and you just, the side lanes win, and then you just go into mid and just focus mid down, and when you're playing a scaling champion that's behind, you're not going to do anything. Like last week when Vigar, not last week, sorry, the week before when they played Vigar and he fell behind, and then they got QSSs. Well, you can't do anything in that scenario. You might as well just not be in the game because you're not going to do anything.
I think you can just lane swap versus M&M and force the issue. I think that's the best way to beat them. You just force the early objectives and then rotate mid very early and put pressure on half-past Thor. I think that's the best way.
Okay. So we're going to end, well, not end, but like talk, some people raised some questions before the show because we asked the audience to kind of basically give us a couple of questions. So I'm just going to ask a couple of questions from here. If anyone from Twitch chat also wants to ask some questions, I might throw in a couple of those in there since Twitch chat seems to be working now, I think. So the first question comes from both Soul Sergeant and Excoundrel. Why is Excoundrel so sexy?
No, man. Just Excoundrel things in it.
Just Excoundrel things in it. I think that might be the quote for the video on YouTube afterwards. What are the major things you think you've improved upon from your starting casting to now? And what are the common mistakes you see from casters starting out? Pete Hartnell asks.
Common mistakes from colour casters I see starting out is they literally just replay by play the action. Don't really think about the bigger picture. Biggest things that I've improved upon is definitely doing replays. I'm way better at doing replays than I used to be. And looking to analyse why things happened as opposed to just what happened. It's something I see all colour casters do. They think they're colour casting by saying, well, Ramos got a good gank off there. That's not colour casting. That's just saying what happened. So the biggest thing for me is just learning to approach the game as the big picture as opposed to approach individual things. I just think that's the biggest mistake I definitely see younger colour casters do is they think just by saying what happened in a slightly different way, it's like explaining it, but you're not really explaining anything. You just replay by playing. So that's definitely the biggest thing that I've seen.
Okay, and Pete Hartnell also asks, as a colour commentator, what can a play-by-play commentator do to best help you perform your role, and also the reverse?
Play-by-play is if they mention items that have been built that I can build on that I haven't noticed. They mention or they ask questions to me as to why they've taken this turret. What's that going to mean for this team? Or they try to bring the storyline in so I can expand on the storyline. That's always great. So just picking up points to talk about. And then as a play-by-play, just giving them good handovers, not trying to interrupt them too much. Knowing when you should hand over and when you shouldn't hand over. Don't expect them to play-by-play a gank that lasts 2 seconds. You can do that yourself. And then in getting them involved in the colour conversation, but not directly asking them to colour commentate. So, like saying, I don't know, and the vision around this dragon is blah, 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 blah. And then the colour commentator will say, oh, yeah, and I've noticed that they've started to put deep vision down. why are they doing that? And then you can expand on it on that kind of thing, you know.
Yeah, okay, cool. And Matt Ruan asks, in your opinion, what is the most important thing to talk about during a game? Is there actually a most important thing that you think that there's one piece of information that you want to give out?
We talked about this earlier in the game,
Yeah.
but earlier in this thing. But the most important thing above everything is storylines for the broadcast. People want to know about the players and the teams in things like the ESL Premiership. That's the most interesting thing about the continuing storylines between weeks. So the most important thing I can give advice to you is always look for the storylines of the players and the teams. The League of Legends can come second.
And apparently a boosted coach, Frozen Dawn, ask whether or not he thinks anyone could be a colour caster with practice, or if there is a certain something people either do or don't have.
Anyone could be a colour caster. It just depends on whether you want to be a successful colour caster or caster in general. The issue with being a caster or commentator is you have to have a nice voice, and you have to have a voice that people want to listen to. So the problem is, if you sound like this and you're trying to commentate, no one's going to want to listen to you because you'll just rather dig your own ears out. So as long as you've got an acceptable voice and people will listen to it, anyone could be a colour caster with time and practice. People are obviously more naturally gifted at it, depending on your personality type. But in general, anyone could be a colour commentator for sure.
And then I've got two questions from Dom Sacco here.
Oh,
the first one is, what's the story behind the name Excoundrel?
I started playing Diablo 2 when I was about 13. I tried to call my character Excalibur. I couldn't. Tried to call my character Scoundrel, but I couldn't because they were both taken. So I ended up being called Excoundrel. There you go.
Cool.
What a great story.
Hey. The second question is, what's the best and worst parts of the job?
Best parts of the job is the people that you meet and the friends that you make, the events that you get to attend, and being on a live broadcast is quite fun, you know. Worst part of the job, Twitch chat. Twitch chat is the worst part of the job. Salty people on Twitter. I'm calling Tundra salty because there was one time in the Four Nations where I accidentally thought that FM lost to the NUEL at MCM, even though NUEL placed higher than MCM. And Tundra was tweeted to say, "This guy, why do ESL hire commentators that don't know jack shit about the game?" And I was like, "Oh, fuck's sake!" Obviously, I really like Tundra, and we're quite good friends now. But that tilted me so hard.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Yeah, Twitch chat and Twitter can be tilting.
And Reddit.
Reddit's been okay to me, but I imagine for a lot of other casters, I know Stress and Pulse really hated Reddit. So.
And then there's a question from, and forgive me if he watches because the name's quite hard to pronounce, but I think it's Ceirnan Excoundrel. Do you think there is a moment in colour casting when you provide too much information, and when do you realise that at a cast is turning basically from too much information to being boring?
Yeah, when I used to have this issue a lot. I used to talk for minutes on end. If I've been talking for a minute or more without my co-caster inputting, I will stop and try and get them to input. It's more about the time that you've been talking without input from your co-caster that is really my marker for that. But yeah, I don't think there's any way you can provide too much information. It's just about the time that you're spending providing that information.
Okay. So before I get onto you doing shoutouts, if anyone wants to ask Excoundrel any questions now, would probably be a good time. But Excoundrel, fire away in terms of any shoutouts that you might have.
Yeah, thank you to you for bringing me on. It's very nice and had a good time. Thanks for everyone watching. Thanks to my mum and dad for banging and bringing me into this world. Yeah, it's pretty much it, you know. Cheers, lads.
Cheeky Nando's and all that good stuff, eh? I'm not sure how much of a delay there is on the stream, or whether people just don't want to ask you questions at all. Maybe people don't care. I don't know. But if not, I'll just finish this show there, I guess. and obviously say a big thank you to you to come onto the show today, because you've given us like quite an excellent amount of insight onto colour casting, just as Sona did with play-by-play. I'm sure a lot of people can make use of the information. Thanks to everyone who asked questions beforehand, and thanks to everyone who obviously tuned into the show today, whether that's on Twitch or maybe even on YouTube on Saturdays when we release the show. Next week we're going to be doing like another great episode, as we'll be doing a super episode where we'll have multiple guests on to talk about iSeries. So it might be a little bit difficult because we will never have a confirmation of the teams that are going, but we'll talk about the teams that we think are going and how they'll obviously place. I'll probably throw in a bit of CSGO in there as well, because I want to start talking about that now. And we haven't finalized all the details for this, so just keep an eye out on social media for updates. You can follow me, Excoundrel Aunties, on social media by checking out the information that is like below these cameras and right in the corner there. And see you all next week, same time, same place. Bye.
Bye.